I moved into the little green house on Pine Street in early spring, just after my divorce was finalized. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people wave at you even if they don't know your name. I chose the house because it was small, affordable, and felt like a good place to start over. I needed peace. I needed a blank page. At first, everything was fine. My mornings were slow, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and the soft hum of birds outside. Most of the houses on Pine were well kept, their lawns trimmed, their porches swept. The people, while reserved, seemed kind enough. There was an old woman across the street who always wore a red scarf no matter the weather. 2 houses down lived a man who walked his dog at exactly the same time every evening without fail. Routine seemed to be the rhythm of this place. That was what made what happened so deeply unsettling. There was one house, though, that didn't match the rest. It sat at the corner, 2 houses over from mine. A little too big for the lot it sat on, pale gray, and always in the shadows, even when the sun was bright. It wasn't falling apart, but it looked forgotten. No one ever came in or out. The windows were always closed, the blinds drawn tight. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone has their own way of living. But then I started noticing things. Some nights, I'd see a dim light flickering behind one of the upstairs windows. It wasn't the kind of steady glow a lamp gives off. It pulsed, like someone walking back and forth with a flashlight, over and over again. Other times, I'd hear this soft, rhythmic knocking. Not loud, but persistent. Always late. Always from that direction. I brushed it off for a while. I was going through a lot, and I figured my mind was just looking for distractions. Still, it got to the point where I avoided looking at the house when I passed it. There was something off about it. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the feeling in my chest told me enough. One afternoon, I decided to ask around. The woman with the red scarf hesitated when I brought it up. She looked at the house, then back at me and said it had been like that for years. No one really remembered when the last person lived there. Rumors, she said. There were always rumors. Some said the owner was sick and never left. Others believed he'd passed away years ago and no one bothered to check. But no one knew for sure. It was strange how a whole house could just be forgotten, left to sit like a wound in the middle of a clean face. A few weeks later, I got a job offer that required me to start working earlier. I began waking up at 4:30 in the morning. It was the only time the neighborhood felt completely still. No cars, no birds, just silence. And that's when I saw him. The first time was through my kitchen window. A man, tall and thin, standing behind the overgrown hedge that bordered the gray house. He wasn't doing anything, just standing, watching. I froze. My first instinct was to convince myself it wasn't real, just a trick of the light, a shadow. But the next morning he was there again, and the next, always in the same spot, always still. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? A man is standing behind a bush and looking in my direction? It didn't feel like enough. I started to document it, took pictures, wrote down the time. Even recorded a video once, though the footage was too dark to show much. I stopped opening my blinds altogether. I felt watched. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. I started locking all my doors and windows obsessively, even during the day. Then one night everything changed. It was late, just past 2 a.m., and I woke up with this feeling of being crushed, like the air itself was too heavy to breathe. I got up to get water and noticed a faint tapping sound. Not from outside this time, from inside, from the attic. My house didn't have a finished attic, just a dusty space above the ceiling with loose boards and old insulation. I had only opened it once to check for leaks. The sound wasn't loud, but it was deliberate, like someone gently tapping wood with their nails. Tap, tap, tap. I grabbed a flashlight and pulled down the ladder. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely climb. I pointed the light into the dark and saw nothing at first, just dust floating in the beam. Then I saw it. In the far corner, a small section of insulation had been pulled away. Behind it, a hole, just big enough for someone to crawl through. The wall behind it wasn't part of my house. It was a shared wall with the gray house next door. The realization hit me like ice. I scrambled back down, locked everything, and called the police. I told them everything about the man, the attic, the noises. They took me seriously, which I didn't expect. The investigation took a few days. They searched the gray house. It was, as people had said, seemingly empty. No furniture, no signs of life. Until they checked the basement. They found a small living space down there. A mattress, canned food, photographs, dozens of them. All of people on our street, all taken through windows. Mine was there too. Pictures of me sleeping, eating, sitting on my couch, all taken from above. They said the man had been living there for years. No ID, no records, just a first name scribbled on a wall. Elliot. He was gone by the time they searched the place. Vanished. The attic hole was real. A makeshift tunnel had been carved through the wall, leading directly into mine. No one knew how long it had been there. I moved a month later. I never went back. I don't know where he is now, or if he's watching someone else. But sometimes when I wake up too early, I still feel that crushing weight. That silence. Like someone is still watching, just beyond the hedge. When I first moved into the Ivy Hollow apartments, I wasn't looking for excitement. I just started a new job in the city, and the place was cheap, quiet, and close enough to walk to the train station. The building was old, probably built in the 60s, but it had character. Worn wooden floors, narrow hallways, walls that carried sound in the way only old places do. Most of the tenants kept to themselves, a lot of young professionals, a few older residents who'd probably lived there for decades. My apartment was on the second floor, just above the laundry room. Small, but clean and functional. I noticed her on my second week there. She lived in apartment 3B. I saw her for the first time as I was coming home late one night, just standing at her door, struggling with her keys. Thin, pale, hair hanging like wet rope over her face. Something about the way she moved caught me off guard. It wasn't nervous or clumsy. It was slow, too slow, like she was acting out the idea of unlocking a door without really doing it. I remember thinking maybe she wasn't well. Maybe she was on something. She didn't say anything, didn't even look at me, just kept fumbling with the key until I went inside. I didn't see her again for days. Over time, I noticed her at odd hours, always in the same spot, just outside her apartment, sometimes barefoot, sometimes still in what looked like pajamas, even in the middle of the day. She never spoke to anyone, never left the building as far as I could tell. But every so often I'd catch her watching, from the stairwell, from the mailboxes, from the narrow third-floor window that faced the courtyard. She'd stand there, still as glass, and just stare. I kept my distance, told myself it wasn't my business. People are weird. It's a big city. That's what I kept repeating. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of water running. At first, I thought it was coming from my bathroom, but everything inside was off. I followed the sound to the hallway. It was louder out there, sharp, like water hitting tile. I climbed the stairs toward the third floor, slowly, heart beating a little too fast for comfort. The sound grew louder with each step. When I reached the landing, it stopped. Everything was dark, quiet. Then I noticed it, the trail of water running from under the door of 3B, pooling just slightly at the edge. I hesitated, then knocked. Lightly. No answer. The next morning, I went to the building manager and told him what I'd seen. He looked confused. Said no one had lived in 3B for over a year. The last tenant, a young woman, had left suddenly. No forwarding address, no contact. Just gone. I thought maybe he was mistaken. Maybe someone had moved in without telling the office. But then the noise started. Every night around 3:11 a.m., I'd hear it. Not just water now, scraping sounds, light footsteps. A faint hum, like someone whispering just out of reach. Always above me, always in 3B. I started recording it on my phone, played it back during the day. Most of it came out muffled, but once in the background, I swear I heard breathing. I stopped sleeping properly. My job started to suffer. My hands shook at work. I avoided the stairwell, avoided looking up at that third window. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation, a leak in the pipes, rats in the walls. Anything that made more sense than what I felt in my chest. But the worst part came a few weeks later. I came home from work and found a note slipped under my door. No envelope. Just a folded piece of paper, old and yellowed. One sentence, scrawled in handwriting that was barely legible. She keeps coming back because nobody helped her. No name, no return address. I took it to the manager again. He looked at it for a long time, then sat me down. Told me something he probably shouldn't have. The girl who lived in 3B last year, her name was Mariah, was reported missing by her sister. But before the police got involved, she was found. In the bathtub. Cold water. Still dressed. They said it was an accident, an overdose. But the apartment had no running water when they found her. The valve to the unit had been shut off for weeks, and no one could figure out how the tub filled. They said she'd been trying to get help, knocking on doors, leaving notes, asking neighbors for simple things. Batteries, light bulbs, matches. Most ignored her. Thought she was just odd. No one really paid attention until she stopped showing up. By then it was too late. They cleared the apartment, cleaned it up, locked it. But people still talked. I moved out the following month, broke my lease, took the hit. I still wake up at 3:11 a.m. sometimes. It's always the same, quiet, except for the faint sound of water running somewhere behind my walls. I don't live near Ivy Hollow anymore. I don't even like walking past apartment buildings. But sometimes when I'm alone, I think about her, standing outside her door, waiting, asking, and no one listened. I moved to Maple Grove in the fall, just before the first snow. It was one of those neatly tucked away suburban neighborhoods, rows of identical townhouses, quiet cul-de-sacs, a community mailbox at the corner. It was the kind of place you forget once you drive out of it. Safe, clean, boring even. That's why I liked it. After spending most of my 20s in noisy city apartments with paper-thin walls and drunk neighbors, Maple Grove felt like a small promise of peace. My unit was on the end of a row, slightly more private, with a little backyard and an old maple tree that looked beautiful in the evenings. Everything was fine for the first couple of weeks. I worked from home, kept to myself, and only occasionally exchanged a wave or polite smile with neighbors. It wasn't unfriendly, it just wasn't personal. But I noticed something strange about the house directly across from mine. Every night, around 2 a.m., a red light would come on in one of the upstairs rooms. A very specific shade, deep, artificial, like the kind you'd see in a dark room or a cheap horror movie. At first I thought maybe someone worked nights or used it as a photography space. But the light wasn't steady. It pulsed, slowly, almost like it was breathing. The first night I noticed it, I didn't think much of it. The second night, it made me pause. By the third night, I was standing at my bedroom window, watching it turn on like clockwork. What made it stranger was that I never saw the people who lived there. I couldn't even tell how many people lived there. Sometimes the trash bins would be full, sometimes not. The curtains never moved. No packages, no mail piling up. Just the red light. Always that red light. Curiosity got the better of me. One afternoon, I took a walk and passed the house slowly. It looked normal from the outside. A little neglected maybe, some weeds in the yard, paint chipping on the trim, but nothing alarming. I looked up at the window where the red light came from. The blinds were drawn tight. The glass looked clean, untouched. I told myself to drop it. People do weird things. Maybe they liked red lights. Maybe it was a grow lamp or some bizarre sleeping habit, but it stayed in my head like a splinter. A week later, I noticed something else. I was out walking my trash to the curb late at night when I heard a sound, like someone muttering. It came from across the street. I looked up, and the red light was on again, but this time there was a shadow in front of it, a shape, barely moving. The muttering was rhythmic, low, almost like a chant. I backed into my house quickly and locked the door. The next day, I asked a neighbor if they knew who lived there. He hesitated before answering. Said the house was rented out a while back by a quiet guy named Wallace, kept to himself. People said he worked from home, maybe something tech-related. But about a year ago, someone called the cops. Strange smells, strange lights. When they came, Wallace wasn't there. The house was empty. No furniture, no sign of recent activity. Just a strange setup in the upstairs room. Red floodlights, a pile of torn fabric, and old photographs of random people. No explanation. The landlord swore Wallace had paid rent in advance and vanished. The place stayed vacant for months. But lately, people said they started seeing the red light again, but no one had seen anyone move in. I didn't sleep that night. The next few days, I tried to ignore it. Didn't look out the window, didn't go for walks at night. I told myself it wasn't my problem. But then one night I saw someone in my backyard, just standing there near the maple tree. I froze. Didn't move. My bedroom light was off and I was looking through the smallest gap in the blinds. He was tall, thin, wearing a hoodie. I couldn't see his face. But what I saw in his hand chilled me, a small round light glowing red. He lifted it slowly and pointed it at my window. I dropped to the floor, called the police. They came, took a report, walked around, found nothing. They said no one else had seen anything, that it might have been a prank. I didn't believe it. I knew what I saw. The next morning I found something taped to my back door, a photograph of me, sleeping. My face tilted just slightly toward the window, my hands under the pillow, taken from outside. I left Maple Grove that day, packed what I could, stayed with a friend across town. I reported it again. They checked the house across the street, but just like before, empty, clean, no lights, no signs of life. But I know what I saw. I know someone was there. Sometimes I still dream of the red light, that low hum, that slow pulsing glow, and the feeling of eyes on me, watching, waiting.